Hello and welcome to the Scrutiny Committee meeting of the 17th of April 2019. First of all, I'd like to apologise to the members of the press, the alios and the public who are here for having to adjourn the meeting for half an hour. It was due to an overrun in the previous meeting this morning, so you have my apologies and thanks for your indulgence by waiting to come before us, so thank you for that. It's the usual housekeeping. There's no fire alarm drill proposed, and I'd ask everybody to keep use their microphones when speaking and not to have any mobile phones or other communication devices on audible. So, do we have any apologies for today's meeting?
Yes, Convener, we have an apology from Councillor Coates and Councillor Jarvis down to substitute.
Thank you. Do we have any declarations of interest for today's meeting?
Non-financial interest in item 4.1 as a board member of Culture, Perth and Kinross.
Thanks, Councillor Ahern.
The same interest.
Thanks, Councillor Parrott. And I'll declare my own interest as a board member of Live Active Leisure. I'm quite happy for the members to stay and listen to the debate, but not to take part of it when it's their relevant board that's been represented. So thanks for that. Now, can we approve the Scrutiny Committee minute of the 6th of February 2019? I'll take that as yes.
Yep.
Thanks. So, without further ado, we have all the three alios here today as part of the annual governance statement, which happens annually. It's the only time that all three alios are present at the one meeting. So I would like to invite Culture, Perth and Kinross to come up, please. Avail yourselves of these seats over there, and if you can give us an update, please. Thanks very much, and we're familiar with some of your faces here, but you maybe want to just identify yourselves for the rest of the committee, please.
Helen Smout, Chief Executive for Culture, Perth and Kinross.
Charles Canool, Chairman of Culture, Perth and Kinross.
James Finley, Queen's Counsel, Board Member.
Thanks very much, and is it yourself, Helen, who's going to give the presentation? Thanks.
Thank you, Convener. Sorry, I'll just pull this a wee bit further forward. And thank you for the opportunity to share with you some of the performance and activity of Culture, Perth and Kinross over the last year. I'll give you a summary of that, and then very happy for all of us to take any questions or to look any deeper into any aspects. Culture, Perth and Kinross, as you know, has a very simple vision, which is to be at the heart of a cultural community that connects people, ideas, knowledge and communities. And its mission is to develop and deliver a range of innovative and creative cultural services, public programmes and partnerships which engage a wide and diverse audience in the very best of local, national and international culture. This vision and mission is widely promoted through our venues, our website, and in the hearts of all of our staff as they carry out their duties. Staff make use of a golden thread in terms of performance reporting to ensure that our activities and priorities are connected to those of not just the Council, very importantly, but also nationally in terms of direction of travel for culture. The charity delivers public programmes and services, learning opportunities in key areas, including libraries and information services. This year we reduced our service from 4 mobile libraries to 3, so we have 16 library services operating across the region. Museums and galleries, of which we have 3, And obviously we're involved in the very exciting developments at the City Hall, the refurbishment of Perth Museum and Art Gallery, and the establishment of a new collections store. The archives, both the formal council archive and community archives, local and family history, and a wider engagement with creativity across the region, in particularly creative industries, artists, makers, and others working in the region. 2018-19 was another busy year for our teams, including implementing a number of savings measures at the start of the year. This included the reduction in the mobile that I mentioned, but also a review of staffing structures, which, having now reached about 3 years old, we've been able to better align to some of our priorities for moving forward. We also celebrated the 40th anniversary of the archive service. We're shortlisted for the Kids in Museum Award, the only Scottish museum to be shortlisted. We completed the first stage of a detailed review of the collections held by the council, saw extensive growth in the use of our makerspace facility at AK Bell, and secured funding from PK Leader to roll this model out to community campus libraries in rural areas. We introduced new Visual Arts and Craft Makers Award in partnership with Creative Scotland. We introduced dog-friendly Fridays, which were probably one of the most successful things in our libraries in the last year, and we are the first Scottish library service, and still the only Scottish library service, to make that facility available. And we've started to implement an extensive programme of public engagement to support the City Hall development, including the recruitment of a first cohort of City Hall champions. And we have 20 volunteers towards our target of 100 volunteers in the first cohort, who have come from all ages and life stages and represent very well the diversity of our communities in Perth and Kinross. And they will be championing the project, but also engaging more directly with their local communities and community groups about that. We currently have 20 key performance indicators in place through our services contract with the council, and a number of more granular measures used internally which help identify the effectiveness and impacts of our activity and enable the board and staff to track performance and ensure that what we are delivering reflects the needs and interests of our communities, as well as delivering on these local and national priorities for culture. Performance is reported on monthly, scrutinised by our extended management team, and reported quarterly to the board for their scrutiny and input. All of our performance information is made available on our website so that the public can see how we're doing as well. Of the 20 KPIs that we have in place, we have met or exceeded targets in 12 of these, including the number of visits to libraries, which have seen a like-for-like increase of 1.8%, with just over 600,000 visits in person. This is, we've been working for a number of years now to slow the rate of decline in library usage, and this is the first time since 2013 that we have seen an increase in library use. So that's quite significant for us locally to have achieved that. Whilst we've seen overall growth of 11.6% in our museums since April 2016 and Culture Perth and Kinross coming into being, our visitor figures for 2018-19 were 16% lower than that of the previous year, and that's due in part to the spike in attendance that we got for the Monarch of the Glen exhibition, and also we saw a significant drop-off during the Scottish summer, which was a very rare one this year in terms of good weather, and not many people wanted to be indoors. And we've seen that trend nationally across museums and cultural sector as well. We did, however, see a 248% increase in our figures in terms of online engagement with museum and galleries resources. And online and digital engagement remains a key priority for us going forward. We've seen about a 38.6% growth in that side of our business since 2016 and a 23.8% growth in the last year in that area. We continue to engage widely with community groups and volunteers, with 216 volunteers, an increase of 13% on the previous year, contributing 7,263 hours of their time to the organisation. That's got a value to us of about £110,000 a year, is no small contribution to be overlooked, and something that we value very much. Our satisfaction figure currently sits at 92% overall, with library services within this at 97 and museums and galleries at 78.8. Whilst that's a reduction of the 98% satisfaction we had last year, the national trend for public satisfaction rates, as reported in the local government benchmarking report, shows that public satisfaction in Scotland for culture and leisure activities has fallen overall, and that in 17-18 was 72% for libraries and 69% in museums. So whilst we must never be complacent about how our communities feel about our services, 92% is still significantly above the national trend. We've also been continuing to develop the organisation and following a review of internal governance this year with the board, the structure of our committees which support board activity and decision making has been extended. There are now 4 key committees which ensure the alignment of operational and strategic activity and scrutinise performance. These are our Finance and Resources Committee, Strategy and Development Committee, Marketing and Communications, and our committee looking at the capital development projects. We've also reviewed our scheme of delegation to reflect the new committee structure, and that will go before the board on the 26th of April for approval. Our current scheme of delegation and governance documents, including health and safety reports, key policies and procedures, organisational risk profile, and financial accounts, again, are all available on our website for scrutiny. We're always open to feedback and proactively seek this from customers, and we've received just over 8,000 questionnaires and survey responses from customers this year, as well as direct engagements with focus groups and other activity. We relaunched a revised customer charter this year to simplify and make clearer our commitment to our customers and how they can help us improve our service, including how they can complain if they have a more formal complaint. We had a total of 20 complaints this year to the organisation, which is not bad again, below the national average for cultural activity, and all of these were resolved to customer satisfaction. There were 20 health and safety incidents, 4 of which were business continuity rather than any minor staff involvement or public involvement. We dealt with 2 subject access requests and 13 freedom of information requests. And we continue to implement the new GDPR regulations, and we have staff training coming up again to refresh and ensure on an annual basis that people are on top of the requirements of this. We've also updated all our privacy statements and changed paperwork to ensure that these are all compliant on a GDPR basis. We've taken on additional health and safety advisors this year, so we now have better external competent advice around health and safety, and that's enabled us to undertake a full review of policies and procedures. So there's quite a lot of activity going on both internally and in the services that we're delivering to our communities. The board may want to add a little bit more to that, but again, we're very happy to receive any questions the committee may have.
Thanks very much for that, Helen. Does any of the other board members wish to add to that before we go into questions?
That's very kind, but I think that was so clear that I don't think we can really add much to it, but I'm sure lots more will come out in questioning.
Okay, thanks for that. I'm hoping that the rise in the footfall for the libraries isn't just down to our 4-legged friends, because obviously they would multiply up your footfall on a Friday. So, as I said, thanks very much for that introduction, and I'll pass it over to the committee to ask questions, and you can ask them of any of the members there. Thanks. So do we have any questions for CPK? Councillor McEwan.
Thank you very much, Convener. You mentioned that your increase in football is 1.8%. Is that uniform across the board, which I don't think it will be? And where it's not uniform, what are your challenges there, and what are you doing to increase, and what are the barriers that you have to stop you being able to improve?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, you're quite right. It's not across the board, that's in total. So 11 of our 16 library venues saw increases, and where we've seen decreases or more static figures in those libraries, There's not a sort of particular, it's not that smaller rural libraries are going down. Some of those are increasing in footfall, and some of our bigger libraries are seeing a more static position. So it's very different, and it's very particular to local communities. So we've been running a programme of Jump Into Libraries, which you may have seen around, hopefully, which is about encouraging an engagement with a much wider community by sort of having a celebratory events with lots of different community activity going on in libraries in order to encourage people who've maybe not been in a library for a long time, or who perhaps have never been into a library and not quite sure what that looks like. And that's having success. That's what we're beginning to see in some of the libraries who were previously down on the numbers. That's beginning to bring people back in. I think increasingly by engaging in partnership, working with other people, including the NHS and others, particularly through the One Library Card system, where people can borrow in Perth and Kinross and return books in Aberdeenshire, should they want to. All of these things are making library use and access more readily available and easier for people. And we just need to keep getting the message out about the range of services that we have, the benefits and opportunities that libraries can afford people, and continue to work in the way which we have been doing, which does seem to be slow but steady growth.
Thanks. I'm encouraged to see that you're evolving more subcommittees. I think that's obviously the way to go, but for people to have more scrutiny and in certain areas. How do you recruit for your board, and then how do you allocate them to do you marry up the skill set of your board members with the various subcommittees you've got, and how effective do you feel you are in that process?
Thank you very much. The board, as a matter of a standing item on the agenda, considers its balance and considers what skill sets are either present or not present going on. So the latest member of the board to join was in fact the former Chief Executive of Visit Britain, and who is from Perthshire, and she's retiring here. So obviously she has skills that we will definitely need going forward in terms of bringing in people to the new museums. The actual membership of the subcommittee is controlled by the relevant chairman of the subcommittee, and in a moment I'll hand over to James Findlay, who can talk through how he has decided who will be on his subcommittees. I, as the chairman of the whole thing, will have a session with each subcommittee chair once a year or so to discuss how those subcommittees are going and in general. And in fact, we have a system of away days when we go away and think about more strategic things. We've just had half an away day, which is what has led to the mild adjustment going from 3 to 4 subcommittees as we are. So that said, I'll just hand over to James.
I'm chair of the Strategy and Development Committee. We have, I think, one councillor member, which we try, I think, and have on all subcommittees, and we've chosen the other committee members for their particular expertise. We have to cover a variety of libraries, museums and art galleries, so we have Plum Grossart, who's got a particular interest and background in libraries. It's myself, who's perhaps got more of a local government involvement in the past, and the other members are chosen to make sure that we have from the capacity of the board, have the right members on that committee, bearing in mind that you don't want too many members on too many subcommittees.
Okay, thanks. I was thinking even about the general board in general. If you need somebody from an HR background, do you go out and actively recruit somebody from an HR background rather than just a blanket recruitment policy?
Naturally, yes, we would. If we identified that we had a gap, we would seek to fill that gap. Obviously, anyone comes if they're strong in HR, if this was the gap. I don't think it is, but they would come with other associated skills naturally, and so our antennae are permanently up. And over what is only just over 3 years, we have had a couple of members who've come off the board for various reasons, and we've obviously had more members on the board. So it's not although it's a standing item on the agenda, it's actually quite an active item. And when we do come across someone like we did with Sandy Daw, we're extremely keen to make room for them straight away, because they obviously have a skill set which is very rare and is very useful for us to have.
Thanks for that. Do we have any other questions from anybody else on the committee? I'll keep going myself here then. I believe in one of the briefing notes I had in my role in Scrutiny that you're introducing a new financial system. Could you give myself and the committee a sort of an update of what that involves and why you felt the change was necessary?
Yeah, so when we were first set up, we inherited the Integra system that's used by the council, and we felt that it's in order to streamline some of our financial processes that we really needed our own system. So the new financial system, Zero, that we are implementing will allow us to link our room booking system with the financial system, so it will take away having to raise invoices on our room booking system and then separately raise them on the finance system. That whole process will now be integrated. It will allow us to email our invoices to our customers, so it just makes the whole process a bit smoother.
Okay, and thanks. And does that, the whole financial system, does it make it more real time, that you can actually see what your position is as you're moving forward rather than quarterly or something like that?
Yes, it's a cloud-based system, so when you log into the system, it gives you a snapshot as to what your current cash flow position is and what your profit or loss is at that period in time when you log in. So it is very much a real-time system, and it does allow us a bit more control over the system. At the moment, if we need any reports, we need to request these from the council, the finance team within the council. So it will allow us to write our own reports and be a bit more in control over what information we can get out of the system.
And obviously that'll have the benefits for decisions you're making for if you can independently verify them to your board members rather than having to wait to have a response from the council. I can understand that.
That's right, yeah.
Do you see any risks with this new system, or do you feel it's totally 100% foolproof and beneficial?
As with all new systems, there are risks, and we have looked at that, but we feel that the benefits significantly outweigh the risks, and I don't think the risks are any bigger than the risks that we have with the current Integra system that we're using.
I can. Lisa Simpson's going to ask a question.
Hi there. Thanks for your submissions around your annual governance statement. Just a couple of wee things I wanted to pick up. Picking up on some of the sort of improvement actions that we've discussed over the past few years as we've been doing this exercise. So in terms of creating the capacity within the organisation for continuous improvement, how do you feel you're placed around that, and what are your key priorities for the coming year?
Yeah, thanks. We do work hard to foster a culture of continuous improvement within the organisation. We use a number of quality improvement frameworks. How good is our culture in sport? How good is our public library service? And we work with staff throughout the organisation on supported and peer-assessed self-evaluations. We have our next whole service or whole organisation self-evaluation planned for June, and we'll be doing one with the Scottish Library and Information Council on our library services in February 2020. So we are always working to ensure that we're not complacent. We're reviewing the evidence, the data that we've got, our customer feedback, wider information about the sector, sectoral changes, national trends, and using that information to plan our priorities. In terms of activity over the next year, then I think we've got a programme in place which, if you like, from last year is very much continuing that on focus of engagement around the City Hall and the projects linked to the big capital projects. Fundraising activity for us has to be a continuing priority. Seeking opportunity to diversify our income further, which is not without its challenges when we're offering statutory and predominantly free services. Strategic relationships and continuing to build those with museum sector in particular, thinking about the public programming for the museum. We've just entered into a very positive relationship with National Galleries of Scotland, National Museums of Scotland, and we'll be continuing to develop others further. And again, I think in terms of looking at ourselves, obviously there were meetings and discussions this morning about what the structures of trusts and things look like going forward, and that work stream will become a priority within the organisation to address and engage with that as well.
And obviously the flip side of that, it would be naive not to recognise that there are challenges. You've got the same financial constraints as council services are experiencing, and cuts have to be, you know, passed down and shared out. What do you think your biggest challenges are going to be over the year, and what have you put in place to try and mitigate or manage some of the risks that are emerging from that?
Yeah. So this year it was the internal financial pressures, if you like. We were very lucky and very grateful to the council when setting their budget for this year that they didn't take the planned reductions from our contract fee. However, we do have a set of internal pressures. We are bound by a number of things which come to us as a result of having been council services previously, and whereby we have little control over the need to implement those, particularly things around the staff terms and conditions and agreements with trade unions and others. So we've been working to build in relationships with the trade unions within the organisation, start to review those. We've been reviewing policies and procedures with them to see where we can make improvements and ensure that we've got the proportionality required for our circumstances as they are now, and not for us as being part of an organisation with 8,500 staff. Capacity is without doubt an ongoing issue for ourselves, as it is for the council and other organisations. We are incredibly lean. The support services, if you like, around us did not transfer to CPK at the point where we started, and so we've had to carve much of that out, and a lot of the work over the first 3 years of existence has been to establish the organisational structures and the procedures and the policies around that to exist as a trust rather than as something which was part of a bigger whole. And I think now we've got ourselves onto sort of solid ground with that. It's about how we now take that forward. But again, looking at some of the things to emerge from this morning's meeting, once we've had a chance to distill that and consider that, that will have some impact on how we respond.
I think if I could make a couple of comments on that as well, from the board perspective, to say that this year, and before the very generous additional monies that came to us, the board had to go through quite an interesting and rather disappointing balloon debate about how we were going to achieve budgetary balance. And of course, for the library system and for the museum system, it's really a function of the number of venues you have and the number of days those venues are open. And so your balloon debate was concentrating on that. So the interesting thing is, in terms of challenging the executive team, is that I think the board is pretty united about where we got to in that, in terms of deciding what difficult decisions we had to take, and B, is it a very high state of knowledge to be able to discuss things with the executive team in what is actually a very sensitive area for the whole of the county in which we all live.
Thanks. I'm going to give my question next because it's following on about how lean your operation is, and again, a briefing note I had at one point, I think you're expecting, which is amazing, to produce a small profit at the end of this year, but any profit's fantastic. Especially when your revenue raising ability is constrained much more than any of the other allios. But my question is, if you are so lean, you've got this massive project coming on board, how will you manage to keep your eye on the ball, if you want, of what's bread and butter just now, as well as taking forward the work that you'll need to take forward about the City Hall project?
Yeah, thanks. There's a number of strands to how we look to the future and what we need to do in the future. We have the organisation, if you like, that we will be when we have these lovely new developments in place and operational. We have the organisation that's on the journey towards that, and we've got where we are now. We have identified a number of additional resources. So within the organisation, we've had additional funding again from the council to support a number of secondments internally. We've brought in additional expertise in order to take forward key tasks and activities which are quite specific to those capital projects. But we've also been undertaking a wider sort of organisational development piece of work, which is about upskilling people more broadly. We've been bringing in consultancy expertise to look at things like licensing and IP licensing opportunities, which might be income generators for us, looking at what retail and product development we might have in the future as income generators. So we're taking both the staff, if you like, on a journey of development so that we can upskill people ready for the new dawn, for want of a better word, when we have the buildings open. But we're also bringing in capacity to support that journey where we need to, and additional expertise. We've just started in the last week a new conservator, again, conservation and sort of the most cutting edge, up-to-date conservation techniques were not something we have in-house. We've procured marketing strategy development, and again bringing that expertise in, which is very much aligned with large-scale visitor attractions, working in a different sphere in terms of tourism, in a way that perhaps we wouldn't normally do as somebody that's looking much more at a regional or a town-based venue. So wherever possible, we're trying to horizon scan, bring in what we need, but also use that to upskill staff so that when we get to the end of the day, we have a model which is as sustainable as possible, which has grown where it can, but will probably still be quite lean, but which has the capability and the expertise to deliver success in those venues.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you. Can you give us any examples of where you've worked in collaboration or partnership with the other ALIOs in Perth and Kinross or national bodies?
Yep, thank you. We have undertaken quite a lot of work with the other ALIOs in a variety of different ways. Very small example, representatives from LAL were involved in our supported self-evaluation. So we worked with them on that process because, again, self-evaluation was something that they were interested in developing further in what they do. We've worked with them on projects in some of our libraries around sort of active lifestyles. We have worked with Horse Cross in a number of different ways. We collaborate a lot with their creative learning. Our archives have been working with them to develop new learning modules, which we'll be offering up to schools, and they've been testing them by working with some of the young people who attend youth theatre activity. We have been working with Horse Cross on a number of cross-promotional activities, where we've had events at the museum, but we've offered discount at the cafe, at the concert hall if they attend. There are lots of different ways in which we work together. Where it's appropriate for us to do that, we don't try and shoehorn things for the sake of it. We also work with a number of different national bodies. I think I mentioned National Museums of Scotland. Our Dress to Impress exhibition at the museum was a result of a partnership with them around their East Asian collections and reviewing that, which gave us a lot of knowledge, and we were able to identify some objects in the collection which we didn't otherwise know exactly what they were. We had good thoughts, but not exactly. And we've been able to impart some knowledge to them about engagement and working with different communities. And they were delighted and have written that up as a case study for their own staff learning. So we've worked with lots of different organisations in different ways. By and large, our approach is if we're going into a project, who can we do this with, rather than how do we do this on our own?
Thanks. If there are no further questions, Councillor Stewart's come to life.
On a previous visit, Helen, thank you very much for your presentation. On a previous visit, I had asked whether you had a calculation about the wider economic impact of some of the, if you like, not the direct services, but the social services that you provide. I was wondering if you'd made any progress on that.
we have done some further research, and there are a couple of different measures, and they go from various ends of the spectrum, if you like. We're very keen that we look further into this and probably will commission some work ourselves going forward. There is a piece of work which has been done around enterprising libraries in England and Wales. That was published in March in 2018, which shows a return on investment of £25 for every pound invested in the enterprise activity that libraries deliver. So the type of activity that we're offering through our maker spaces at the AK Bell and working with Accelerator on the business startup, the type of return on the investment around that is about £25 to every pound. More generally for libraries, work that DCMS have been undertaking, where they've been reviewing their libraries in England and Wales, perhaps more wholesale than has been happening in Scotland, shows a return of investment of £11.05 for every pound that has been invested. So again, that's looking more broadly, generally, and that was a social impact study rather than just an economic impact study. So there are lots of measures out there, and I think for us going forward, we'd probably quite like to have a look at that, but maybe look at that more broadly in partnership with other cultural activities in the area, and look at partnering perhaps to get a piece of work done. They did a very interesting economic impact assessment in Dundee, which was published at the start of this year, which looked at their cultural sector as a whole, and they arrived at, I think, a £4 return on every pound invested. So it'll be interesting to do something and just measure out across the wider T-Cities region what that looks like.
Okay, thank you very much. It was the social impact of the economic spend I was meaning. So a separate question. You'll all of the LOs, yourselves and Horsecross will be aware that our Strategic Policy and Resource Committee this morning was considering a paper on the future of the cultural, the transformation options for the ALIOs. There was a specific reference in the paper just in relation to identified key skills and or capacity gaps. And I just wondered if you wanted to come back on this. One was about, the point that sort of sprang to my notice was skills or capacity gap in the ALIOs in relation to curatorial expertise given the scale of City Hall. And I just wondered how you were preparing to address that gap.
Yeah, thank you. I think from our own point of view, in terms of curatorial expertise, then I think we have a very strong curatorial team, particularly around the City Hall. We've very good strengths in archaeology, medieval history, and in the story that we're telling in City Hall. In fact, we've got one of the sort of some of the key experts in the archaeological side of things in Mark Hall, who works with the museum service. I think there are some wider issues around growing that team's skills and expertise around programming for a building and with that scale and ambition. And when I was answering Councillor Lane's question earlier, it's that journey that we're on. So it's about engaging with a whole lot of people who have some expertise, using that expertise to build capacity within the team. But it's also about going out and seeing what's working. We were in Aberdeen just last week having a look at their art gallery development and collection store development to see what we can learn from that. We network with museums across the UK in order to ensure that we're picking up as much as possible about good practice, emerging practice, where there are things that we want to do and who we want to work with, what individuals might have something to add value to what we're planning. And we have a very good strength on the board in terms of museum expertise and knowledge and understanding of what's happening, not just in the UK, but more widely across the world.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Do you want me to add something to that? Because I've got it here, and of course this is a paper that we didn't get an opportunity to comment on. And I think in drafting terms, there's no suggestion that there's any current curatorial expertise gap at all in the current operation. I would have to say I think we bat well above our size in curatorial expertise. We're all aware that if we have a much bigger entity in City Hall, we will have to grow our business towards it. And part of the reason for going away for our half day to reorganise our board substructure was to begin, to continue the process of marching towards that. And in particular, one of the major reasons why we're so pleased to have Sandy Daw, who was a very well-respected chief executive of Visit Britain, is to bring into our board the sorts of skills that we will need to grow gradually something which will be required to be fully operational at the end of 2021. So it's what I can say about that. I think it's a very helpful point because it makes it absolutely certain that you understand one of the key challenges we have. But I want to be absolutely clear that it is something which we really understand as a board and have fully in mind and challenge our chief executive regularly on the point. And I, who've got quite a lot of experience in museums, am really satisfied with how we're treating this at the moment. Not to say that we have a final solution, because we're still 2.5 years away from the sort of pressing the go button, but we're fully up to speed today in curatorial terms, better than you'd expect an entity of our size in Scotland, I would suggest. And did you have anything to add, Jamie? Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And with that, I'll let you escape. And we'll have a more in-depth discussion when you make your next appearance, as you'll be probably the only ally here that day, and we'll have more time, won't be suppressing. So thanks very much for your attendance, and thanks for your forbearance with us over our late start. I'll hand over to you just now. Good afternoon and welcome. Again, apologies to yourselves for the wait you've had. At this point, because of my aforementioned declaration of interest, I will now pass over to the Vice Convener to take this part of the meeting. Thanks.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Convener, and good afternoon, Live Active, and welcome. Perhaps by way of a start, as before, if you could introduce yourselves to us, that would be kind. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Paul Cromwell. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Live Active Leisure.
Thank you very much.
Regrettably, the company's chair and vice chair were unable to attend this afternoon, but I am delighted to be accompanied today by my colleague Fiona Cameron, who is the company's Head of Finance and Deputy Chief Executive.
Thank you very much indeed. Paul, I'm assuming that you'll lead with your presentation, and Fiona will come to you afterwards if you have points to add. Thank you very much. Paul.
Okay, thank you. As requested, I'll provide a brief update touching on key areas of the annual governance statement, and then I will hand over to Fiona, who will provide an overview of the company's trading position and key project areas of focus for Live Active Leisure moving forward this year. We recognise, acknowledge and appreciate the investment in our community's health and well-being that the authority provide through Live Active Leisure. And we take pride in ensuring that we deliver in a range of ways to provide a balanced offer from Perth City to smaller towns and our rural communities. This is increasingly achieved through partnership working, ranging from clubs to businesses to partnership organisations, and of course communities, individuals and volunteers. Against a backdrop of economic challenge, we are identifying and delivering projects which have blended funding arrangements in place to maximise the opportunities for people to live active lives. Touching on the governance statement themes, the responsibility for governance arrangements for Live Active Leisure, of course, lies with the company's board of directors, which is comprised of a total of 11 directors, 8 independent and 3 elected members nominated by the authority. The board composition is, of course, vital and must consist of the right mix of experience, skills, attributes and capabilities to provide the strategic direction for the company. Our directors' recruitment process is robust, with established induction, code of conduct and directors' skill matrix in place. Our board possess a wide range of skills and expertise across the business spectrum, including banking, charity law, human resource management, marketing and promotion, health promotion, and building design and operations. And all possess the personal attributes required in the role, such as leadership and excellent interpersonal communication skills. The main board meet 6 times a year with 4 subcommittees established which have delegated responsibilities across finance and governance, property and environment, services and communications, and human resource. Additionally, the company have 2 consultative committees covering HR and health and safety. The passion, commitment and knowledge of our board of directors is an undoubted strength in our governance arrangements, and it is never lost on me that directors give their time and expertise entirely voluntarily for the benefit of our communities. Moving on, a key foundation of any organisation, in my view, is effective health and safety management and arrangements, and the culture of every person going home safe and healthy every day flows from the board to the Joint Consultative Committee, to our venues, to our teams based in schools and communities, and culminates in procedures, processes, the delivery of a comprehensive training programme across the company's team of staff, and a safer environment for staff and customers. Given the significance of demonstrating effective health and safety, our venues are all assessed independently to achieve the nationwide Leisure Safe accreditation. I can confirm that the venues assessed over the last 12 months have achieved accreditation with scores over the 80% mark. Additionally, the company achieved a 100% score to receive the Institute of Qualified Lifeguards Approved Training Centre accreditation. One of the key areas which has demanded additional resources this year is in relation to data protection and in particular cybersecurity. This is an area that is becoming increasingly complex on a year-to-year basis. It is reassuring that we procure our IT services and expertise from the authority. But as a single example, we look at the increasing sophistication now of phishing emails which appear from time to time in our mailboxes, which require constant attention from technical staff and present real risk and challenge. Given the increased communication that we now have with customers to ensure our products and services deliver to their expectations, I feel this is an area which will continue to require additional services and resources moving forward, not least in staff training, to ensure that our teams continue to be confident and competent in the management of personal data and information. How we communicate, consult and engage with our communities is of course of paramount importance, and we continue to develop each of these areas proactively. Our communication channels operate in a variety of ways, through information posted in our venues, to digital communications to customers, through the media, through the press, our online information, through Spectator, which is our quarterly stakeholder digital newsletter, and through our annual achievement report, which represents all the positive work and successes which have been achieved by our teams throughout the year. Consultation with our customers is ongoing to ensure that we are delivering on our customer promises, and a range of surveys and audits have been completed over the course of the last year. One of our most recent surveys asked customers to rate our 4 customer promises with a mark out of 10. We offer good value for money, was 9.11. We make your experience great, was 8.8. We are here whenever you need help, is 9.17. And we make it easier to live an active life, was 9.19. Delivering excellent customer care is something that is vital in the service industry, and we continue to look at how we can improve in this area. We are currently reviewing our customer service policy, procedure and arrangements to ensure that our standards of delivery continue to reflect our customers' expectations. Live Active Leisure continues to engage with a range of stakeholders to jointly identify local needs and aspirations in relation to increasing and maintaining levels of physical activity. And we are represented at a number of key partnership groups at both strategic and at a local level. Some examples of this work in action includes the extension of the All Ability Cycling Scheme to 2 new localities, creation of new community sports hubs, new disability cricket programme at Bell Sports Centre. In addition, the continued development of our Compass membership scheme, which offers free and reduced cost access to Live Active leisure services for priority target groups who are socially or economically disadvantaged. The Compass membership is a great example of where we are working with key agencies to support those people who have never used our services before to overcome that barrier and benefit from a more physically active lifestyle. We currently have 63 agencies registered with approximately 1,000 active members. We also engage with a range of local businesses through 3 key products. Our Live Active Rewards, where we have over 80 local businesses offering discounts to our members. Our Live Active Perks, which is offering rewards to employers to reward their staff. And our Live Active Tourist product, which is working with local hoteliers to offer discounted access to our services for their guests. Finally, for myself, I just wanted to briefly mention that as an area of rapid change and movement, we are developing a new company website, which we plan to launch this summer. And as part of this, we will be looking at how we improve on our current online publication of information to ensure that we continue to demonstrate openness and transparency on all aspects of how Live Active Leisure operates and performs. Thank you.
Paul, thank you very much for that. Fiona, if you'd like to come in now, thank you.
Thank you. So as Paul reported at the Scrutiny Committee in November, 18-19 has been a challenging trading year for us. At the end of Q3, the company was currently forecasting to be 2% behind budget for the year. A number of unplanned factors have contributed significantly to this. We had 2 unplanned closures at Perth Leisure Pool last year. Obviously, the extremely temperate weather conditions that we had in the spring-summer last year impacted across all the usages, across all venues. The knock-on effect of those reduced usages impacted negatively on the live catering outlets, especially at Perth Leisure Pool and Bell Sports Centre. We also had a 3-week closure of Bredalbin Pool for essential maintenance work, and the Dewars trading performance was down, which was attributed mainly to reduced meeting room demands. A range of actions were put in place to mitigate the trends from the first half of the year, and we have seen some recovery, particularly at Perth Leisure Pool and also at Dewars Centre, where we invested in improving the offer and increasing the marketing activity of the venue. Moving forward, we do face the economic challenge, and therefore we need to continue to be innovative both in the services and activities that we deliver, but also in relation to the funding and partnership opportunities that we might have. We are progressing the following key projects that will have a significant impact on the services that we provide. PH2O is of course one that everybody will be familiar with. That remains a key priority for us, and we continue to work in partnership with the local authority colleagues on developing the next stage business and design case. Bell Sports Centre, we're currently working in partnership with the Ganachie Trust, undertaking a feasibility study to provide analysis and design options to ensure the ongoing sustainability and significance of Bell Sports Centre as one of the key sports hubs within Perth City. And finally, as we know, the cost of delivering services across such a diverse and largely rural area is increasingly challenging, and the requirement of a longer-term vision to secure the future of sport and leisure services throughout Perth and Kinross is crucial. Therefore, over the course of the next few months, the company will be conducting a broad business review. This review will consider the anticipated economic environment moving forward. It will scenario plan on that basis, identifying opportunities to improve service outcomes, organisational efficiency, and potentially different models of delivery. The outcome of this study will enable more effective planning for the future and to ensure that the shared strategic objectives of both Live Active Leisure and Perth and Kinross Council are achieved.
Thank you very much both for those presentations. I'd now throw it open to committee members for questions. Mike.
Yeah, just on the point about it being a challenging year due to the prolonged summer, which reduced indoor facility use. The review you're undertaking, is it going to look at that to see if there might be some change to accommodate, hopefully, a repeat of that in the future, in terms of how you can respond to that change, possibly?
Yes, it is a challenging one, and as a team we pray for rain for most of the summer. It was particularly we had two particular issues last summer. One was that we had the temperate weather, and I think, as Helen said earlier, it impacted across the service industry because people didn't really want to be inside. On top of that, one of the unplanned closures we had was also at the start of the summer, which obviously impacted Perth Leisure Pool significantly, given that was our peak time. We will always respond to that as best we can, but yes, in terms of a business review, we will be looking at operating models. We need to be as flexible, our design of our staffing structures, and in terms of the delivery, needs to be as flexible as possible so that it can respond to reactive situations such as that. We did that ourselves this year. We obviously had a very difficult first 4 or 5 months, and since then we've reacted. So we looked at that, we looked at how we could grow, we put in place promotions. Certainly for the Jewess facility, we made some significant investments. We did some very direct marketing in terms of how we managed to try and increase the business that we had, and some of that has been very successful. So yes, it will be part of the business review, because the business review will be fairly broad and will be looking at a number of different areas. But please be assured as well that we are, in terms of reflecting on our business performance, that's something that we look at on a month-to-month basis and make changes as and when we can.
Just on the time scale of that.
Yep, please do.
Yeah.
Yes, we're looking to complete that over the course of the next 3 to 4 months by the end of the summer. We've just finished a 3-year contract. We've just come off the back of a 3-year contract with the local authority for delivering services. We are currently on an extended 1-year basis, and the reason behind that was to enable this business review to be completed so that we can have a more strategic view going forward in terms of the services that we can deliver, looking at, as Fiona mentioned, the economic realities. We also have the PH2O project, which is sitting in the background, and on top of that we have an exciting project in terms of the Bells feasibility project. So this year enables us to bring a lot of these factors together so that we can plan more effectively for the future.
Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, thanks, Vice Convener, and thank you for the presentation. It's always good to hear from Live Active and find out how things are developing in that particular area of service delivery. The consequences, as Councillor Barnacle pointed out, of the weather are slightly beyond us, I suppose, but the consequences of breakdowns within Perth Leisure Pool seems to me might be a growing concern. How's that factored into your register of risk in terms of both the frequency and the impact of plant breakdowns at Perth Leisure Pool, and how will we deal with this?
Yes, as building managers, we obviously have preventive maintenance plans in place, and we have an asset strategy in place. So these are documents and arrangements that we've covered for a number of years. But as is well documented, we know that the buildings are getting older. We are currently conducting a series of more intrusive condition surveys, which we're looking for that to have been completed by June, and that will be across all our venue assets, because there's a number of our venues now. We're obviously getting towards that 30-year mark. So we have a huge wealth of information already on the condition of our assets and our plant and everything else, and as I said, we proactively have maintenance plans in place to do that. The buildings are getting older. The intrusive condition surveys will give us more of that information. Is it beyond the possibility that we might have to start factoring in periods where we do, a week's closure to do essential maintenance on a more planned basis going forward? I think that is likely, until we obviously realise either a significant investment into Perth Leisure Pool or an alternative venue.
Vice Convener, if I could have a supplementary. It seems to me a particularly hostile environment for a building, a leisure pool, so that being the case with the age of Perth Leisure Pool, it's not a question of whether or not we replace it, it's a question of when we replace it. So has your business case for the replacement of Perth Leisure Pool factored in the ongoing compound cost of construction inflation with every year that we don't replace it?
think it does, in short, we absolutely have to consider that. I think the fact that we're going back to square one almost to start a full business case and design review again does remove the fact that we've, the first business case was done almost 7 years ago, I think it was, or slightly longer than that. So it does obviously have to reflect the fact that times have changed, and we don't know what we're looking at just now either for what the building may be, what the review is going to bring out.
Maybe just to add to that, obviously the business review will look at these aspects. We'll have a better understanding once we have intrusive costs in place and intrusive condition surveys in place in terms of time lengths that the various areas of the building have in terms of age. One of the factors that we've mentioned before is we don't want to do abortive spending on significant things if and when the new venue is coming along. So what we need to look at now is once we have that information, we can then factor in the costs and the work that we're going to have to schedule, plan, and pay for over the course of the next 5 years. That's really why we've asked for the extension to the contract this year, because that information is being gathered over the course of this year and allows us to much clearly look at how the future delivery of that's going to be over the course of the next 5 years.
Thank you. Any more questions? Sheila, please, and then...
Thank you, Vice Convener. My question really is around your catering operations and what is the current projection in terms of P&L relating to that?
It's not been a positive year for catering this year, and it has made a loss for the company this year in terms of performance. It's very difficult if your footfall is down, obviously, in your two venues, because obviously that then translates to your catering offer. Less footfall in the venues, less transfer in terms of the catering offer. Over the course of the last 3 months, we've done a significant catering review and made quite a number of far-reaching changes in terms of what the delivery is going to look like going forward. So going forward, we are looking now to make a profit, as you would expect, over the course of the next year. We have put in extremely rigid performance monitoring requirements as part of that. It's something that we will have to review on an ongoing basis, because we appreciate and everybody understands that the catering offer needs to cover its costs and generate a surplus where possible. But we have a range of actions now in place, not least staff restructuring, change to products, change to menus, reviewing of prices, changes to our vending contract services. So there's a range of areas now that we've put in place that we are confident that over the course of the next year that we will be back into the profitable margins.
If I may ask a supplementary, thank you, that's a very helpful response. The reason I ask is that I've had a number of constituents comment on their view that the options available, particularly at Bell Sports Centre, are unhealthy for a place that's supposed to promote health, and also that they're not always available easily for people who use outside facilities, and that the hours that they're available isn't necessarily very good. So I think reviewing the whole option is very welcome to hear. Do you intend to engage with customers around part of that review?
Yes, there'll certainly be surveys done in terms of that. I would say that both our live catering venues offer the Healthy Living Award. So whilst I recognise the comments that not everything we have is maybe in that, we do overall in terms of our menu there is a balanced offer to the point that it is accredited by the Healthy Living Award. But yes, we need to look at that. Bell's is very unique in terms of footfall. The demands during the week are very small and very few, and at weekends we can have hundreds of people looking to get an offer. The configuration at Bell's is another challenge, because those that know it will realise that the cafe is in a significantly different part from where the actual venue and the main arena is. Now, as part of obviously the Bell's feasibility study there's an opportunity for us to have a look at the configuration and the location and the offer that we provide. We also provide a service to the Perthshire Rugby Club as part of their weekends as well. So we have a real mixture in terms of the delivery and the footfall that we have to manage at Bell's, and that is a challenge, but it's something that we are looking at, and we will be looking for feedback from customers.
Colin, please, and then I'll jump in myself with a couple. Thanks.
Thanks. Members were provided with in advance with a briefing note, which is helpful. And it refers to the number of conference delegates that you achieved at the end of Q3, and the full year target of 20,000 delegates may not be met. Sorry, convener. It's okay if I... Right,
go on, Colin.
So the number of conference delegates. Just to be clear about what a conference delegate is in relation to Live Active Leisure. So, I mean, you don't get huge numbers of conferences held in, for example, the Jewers Centre, but does that include all of the people that attend things like the Model Railway exhibition and that sort of thing as well?
I believe our definition of conference delegates for this looks at the number of people who are at a full day or half day event. So
Okay.
I'm not actually positive that it will include like the number of people at an event as such. It will be an actual conference.
Oh, right, okay. So the actual number of people visiting the facilities could be substantially in excess of that, depending on the definition.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. And the other question was, so you think that you're still on track to meet your annual target of attendances for the 2018-19 year, I presume it is, or is it a 2018 on? No, it must be 2018-19 year. On that, even with the drop-off in numbers of attendances last summer because of the very warm weather. So that's actually quite positive if you're, at least on track to sort of get there or thereabouts. Just curious, just out of curiosity, when the weather was nice and people were not going to, I don't know, the gym or swimming or whatever indoors, do you not have enough outdoor facilities to, to shift the balance of activities within the organisation from what was, what would be provided indoors in November to, to what might be provided outdoors in more climate times of the year, temperate times of the year?
Not to that capacity. I mean, obviously, the issue we have, the big issue we had last summer was Perth Leisure Pool was hit quite badly by that. Obviously, the sports halls gyms tend to get quieter towards the summer months anyway. That is the trend. The winter time, January, is the gym time, as everybody knows. Everybody gets after Christmas and New Year and gets into the good habits and sees the photographs maybe they didn't want to, and everybody comes into the gym. So that's our busy time for the gyms and group fitness. Conversely, when that season finishes for our dry side facilities, if you like, we go into the pool and swim pools, and Perth Leisure Pool in particular, which is our principal site and principal in terms of generating income and its usage. Obviously, it was hit last year. So in terms of scalability for outdoor activities, yes, we have outdoor activities, but not to the scale that could manage or compensate for that drop.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If I can ask a couple, and first of all make a point following on from Colin's observation. You hold a number of, I think, fairly substantial visitor events there. The Wool Fair is one example that started off, I think, using one hall, and this year is planned for two. And the games, the board games event, which I understand is going into a second, bigger, hopefully successful year. Do you actually log the numbers of visitors to those events as part of the business? And can I ask, if you like, how important that part of the business is to you?
I mean, obviously, at Jewers, yes, the Festival of Yarn, which is a great event, as you say, has doubled in terms of size this year. So that's something that is obviously extremely important to Jewers, particularly our events that we have off-season when we don't have curling, we don't have bowling, and we have these halls and venues available. So yes, the events that you've mentioned continue, and we have a long-standing arrangement with them. The numbers in terms that the events bring is obviously somewhat out of our control to a certain degree because they're not our events. However, the health of these events is absolutely critical to us to ensure that the event organisers rebook and continue to wish to use our venues and grow the business. So yes, we actively and proactively looking to increase the number of these venues that we have bearing in mind that they have to operate at a time when bowling and curling and ice skating and other activities aren't programmed in.
So am I right in perhaps drawing the conclusion that going forward into any changed offer, probably still being able to attract these events at the right time of the year will be important to you?
Yes, and I think what we've always said is we have flexibility. We also have Bells Sports Centre, which has got, again, if you talk about trends, then Bells is quieter generally during the summer period. So we have flexibility in terms of what venue that we're looking at on Glover Street in terms of that development going forward, but we also have flexibility in terms of some of the other venues that we operate to continue to attract events from outside the area.
Thank you very much. And a second, if I may. I noticed that you've assisted 127 voluntary sports clubs, exceeding your target of 115. Can you say a little bit to me about the nature of the advice and the support you've given, and what potential there is for expanding that side of what you do? Thank you.
Yes, we have a small sports development team who work extremely proactively with clubs, building capacity, leadership. We offer courses each year to upskill and make sure that we provide guidance in terms of their own action plans to ensure that they are working with the communities. As part of that, we obviously link in with the active schools teams, and we also link in with our community sports hubs. Over the last year, I think you may be aware of an accreditation that we've introduced, which is called PACES, which again, what that does is it provides a quality mark, not only for ourselves, but it's also applicable now for all local authority facilities, for clubs to book venues. And what that does is it gives assurance and reassurance on areas such as child protection, and governance, and insurance, and capability, and leadership, and all these different types of areas. So not only are we providing that, we'll provide support to enable people to work towards generating these documents and building that capacity.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from members? I'll ask a couple more if I may then, before we perhaps last call and before we finish off. I noticed that you had a planned loss in this financial year of 180k, and to some degree a poor trading summer has exacerbated that. Is the nature of the loss at the end of the year the same shape as you thought it would be, or have you managed to mitigate some of the difficult trading with, in a sense, doing better against the planned area of loss? Thanks.
Yeah, of course, as we became aware after the first 6 months of the potential increase to the loss that we had already planned on having, we have done quite a lot of work to make sure that it wasn't exacerbated too much further. Some of that's had to be about not spending monies that were planned, so that we didn't exacerbate that loss any further. But obviously that has to be married up with the impact to the customers, to the services that we deliver, and the experience that we get. As Paul mentioned, we do go out and ask customers for their feedback, so we have to watch what planned spend we can take away without affecting it too much. Unfortunately for us, it's the income has been our biggest impact this year, and we have a very high volume of fixed costs, including property costs as well. So it's very challenging to bring that back, but I hope it's not going to be any worse.
Thank you very much for that. And the final one, if I may, the council's budget this year made provision for a sum of money for design and development work towards the PH2O project. I realise it's only a relatively short time since the budget, but has there been any, if you like, concrete positive work in terms of moving ahead with that money? Thank you.
Yes, it's been very progressive since the decisions were made. So in terms of the governance, and the project teams are established and moving forward. So we have timescales on that. Obviously, we are looking to conclude that project over the course of this calendar year to enable information and a decision to be hopefully progressed at the budget next February. So yes, there has been progression between ourselves and council colleagues, and we're extremely appreciative of that.
Thank you very much. Any final questions from committee members? No? In that case, thank you very much for your presentation and answers to our questions, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much.
Hello, Mike. Sorry that you've had such a long wait. And thanks for your appearance here today. And for remembrance, Jason, is it Jason? Peter. So I don't remember. Sorry. So if you just introduce yourself to refresh everybody's memory, please. And then you can go ahead and give a presentation, please.
Thank you very much. I'm Mike Griffiths. I'm the Interim Chief Executive of Horsecross Arts, and I have with me Peter Winkles, who's our temporary Head of Finance. Also in the audience, I have a board member who also you've already seen before, Charles Canool. Thank you very much for asking me along today. I just wanted to give you a brief summary of some of the things that have happened. It's just about a year since I first met you all, and it's been a particularly challenging but interesting year. There's, in amongst some of the difficult financial information, there's a lot of useful and positive things that have happened this year. We've obviously taken on the extra building, which we had managed previously, but has changed in its complexion with its new creative learning space and the Joan Knight studio, as well as a completely different catering setup. And that's been an interesting challenge for us to incorporate the various different activities that we have, including the various different performing arts that we do. That includes the theatre, music, classical music, and dance, into the 4 spaces that we now run, as well as the creative learning space that we have in the theatre as well. Added to that is obviously starting a new building brings with it a whole series of snagging issues that we've had to deal with throughout the year. Thankfully, many of these things have been resolved, and some of those things will be included in further conversations that we're having with Perth Kinross colleagues. We have a board that was put in place by the council a number of years ago. We started to do some refreshment this year after identifying that we needed some additional expertise in marketing, and went through a process which I think we had done for the first time of public announcement and advertisement, and then an interview process to come up with a board member who was local to join the board at around Christmas this year. We've also invested quite heavily in a new ticketing system and a new website, and we've seen immediate positive outcomes from that. The web traffic is up by 5%. The number of tickets are up by 41%, and the value of those tickets are up by 47%. It's also been matched by a series of new bookers. We had out of our number of customers, which was up by 21% to 26,500, we had new bookers made 42% of that this year, which was up last year. This year we had 11,262 new bookers, and last year we had 8,500. The volume of tickets has also increased by 25%, from 147,424 up from 117,557. And we have a total face value of the income that we've got from our various activities up by 13% to £2.3 million. The number of performances have also gone up substantially, 23% more cultural performances, and we have a much stronger creative learning offer this year as well. As part of the changes when I arrived, we have made a number of structural changes to the staff. We reduced the headcount by 8, and we put in quite a rigorous change in the technical staffing to amalgamate the two teams so that we could run both the buildings more efficiently and spread the activities more efficiently across the 4 venues. The theatre programme has been highly successful this year. We won awards for particularly Knives and Hens, but most of the programme that we've put through has had fantastic critical success. Not all of it has had audience the numbers that we would like to have had this year. The new building, with the work that we've done, has now joined the concert hall in having received the Green Business Award, the Gold Award for that. And none of this could really have been done without the dedicated support of the staff who have taken on board the various different changes with quite a lot of good humour and alacrity. This is phase 1 of a process where opening the new building we felt was going to be a process till we had it fully running correctly of between 3 and 5 years. And at the end of this particular year, we're obviously now reviewing the operations that we've done so far this year with a view to making improvements ongoing, both with the operations, with financial reductions, and to improvements with overall service. I'm not sure there's an awful lot more I can say, but I just wanted to pass you over to Peter just to give you a flavour of some of the changes that we're looking at with the financial system that we inherited in April last year, and the reasons for some of the changes that we've made in order to try and give us much better information, more timely information and more accurate information.
Thank you, Mike. Just first of all, reiterate what Mike said. I came in to help the company back end of November, and very unfortunate circumstances as well, due to the illness and then the passing away of the finance manager. So I've been focusing on helping the organisation as quickly as possible in the run up to the financial year end. I think there's been 3 key areas where my work has been concentrated. Initially, it was to look at the forecast that was predicted in November for the year end, and review that, implement that, get that into the finance system so it could be reported against on a real-time basis. So that was the first thing. That was done in the first 3 or 4 weeks of arriving. Once that was established, then the next thing was getting the turnaround of the financial information on a much faster turnaround. So I think at the time figures were being produced somewhere between six weeks after the month end, and we managed to bring that into around 15 working days. And that's down to a lot of the hard work of the team, which is a relatively small team for the scale of the operation. And alongside that, the next major exercise in the calendar year, which was a little bit later than would be normally planned, was putting together a budget and a balanced budget that could be signed off by the board, and that was done in February, March. So that's now been complete. So we've got a budget for next year. That budget will be allocated across budget holders so that they can monitor their figures and their budgets on an ongoing basis in the current financial year. That gave me an opportunity to look at some of the things that could be improved in sort of the quick wins, if you wish. And those sorts of things which we have started already are bringing in commercial online banking, which will provide a huge efficiency saving in terms of data processing within the finance team. The other is looking at ways in which the payroll system, which doesn't directly integrate with the accounting system, information can be brought in more efficiently. So that's another area. We've looked at how data is captured within the finance system and allocated to cost centres to enable people to be able to track their budgets better. We have implemented document scanning so that, particularly for the trading company, invoices can be scanned and immediately presented to the accounting system and analysed, which speeds up process. And the organisation had a management reporting tool called Futurely, which we've reactivated, and I think once we've got the budgets up and running and in place, we'll look at those reports, and they should produce real-time reports for budget holders. The other areas longer term would be looking at how the finance system can use information coming out of other key business systems like the events management system, like the box office, to streamline business management reporting and therefore getting out meaningful information in a more sort of cost-effective and practical way. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that presentation to both of you. I do believe, and I don't think MD would dispute, that the productions that are put on are critically acclaimed and very good productions, and they'll be held in high regard all over Scotland. But when it comes to this committee, I'm afraid we'll always have to turn around to the financial implications of the balance between critically acclaimed and financially balanced, if you want. To go back to last year's budget, it was set with a £180,000 deficit. What is the current position at the year end? Was it £180,000, the deficit? And if so, what measures are being taken to next year that will give us confidence that it will be a balanced budget that will be adhered to next year?
With the caveat that we're going through the year end, you do a lot more detail and there's the audit still to come. We anticipate the year end deficit being close to the 188 that we predicted in November when we met. When did we meet before? Was it the last time we came up in front of the Scrutiny Committee? Was it January, something like that? Yeah.
The funding to cover that deficit was awarded at the budget meeting in February. My understanding that won't all be given in one tranche. Does it come in various tranches, and is it dependent on some interventions from council officers?
I understand, obviously the chairman has been in detailed conversation with officers from the council, and I understand absolutely that the payments will be given out when the council is confident that we're achieving the targets that have been agreed within the agreement for the £180,000.
Okay, thanks. And moving forward to, if it was a deficit of 180,000 last year, what measures do you have that would give me confidence that we won't be in this position next year?
Well, we've gone through a fairly thorough budgeting process to cut out and reshape the organisation to try and find another £320,000 worth of savings, which is obviously a fairly major challenge. And again, because we are looking at it in a little bit more detail, we're going through a second phase now of deciding how we restructure the organisation to make sure that the savings that we've identified will actually be delivered at the end of the year. Because I don't think any of us in the organisation want to go through yet another year of deficit. And actually, there is the potential going forward, obviously, depending on how the outcome of this morning's decision goes forward as to how we get to the end of that. We're quite confident at the moment that we can deliver enough savings to make that possible.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ahern.
Thanks very much, Convener. Thank you very much for your report. I suppose this follows on from a question that Councillor Stewart put to Live Active Leisure in terms of conference delegates and the fact that they answered back that the numbers were on specifically for conference. You, in our briefing notes, apparently have had up to Q3, 9,335 delegates with a year's target of 17,000, which is substantially less than what Live Active Leisure had as a as a target. With you being in control of probably two of the best facilities in the city for conferences, which is the concert hall and the theatre, I suppose two questions. One, why you've got such a low aspiration for a target, and also what the problems are in terms of your ability to attract conferences.
The conference is slightly lower than we wanted in terms of delegates. The number of conferences and meeting delegate days is roughly where we'd hope them to be, and the number of attendees who come to functions is slightly higher. What we're trying to do, because we're not just a conferencing centre, we're trying to fit in where we can with the new spaces in amongst the other performing arts that we put in there. Conferencing is really important to us, and as part of the trading company, which had a turnover of about 1.1 million this year, a large percentage of that trading income comes from the conferencing events that we do. So this year, I think we were predicting a surplus in the trading company of about £220,000, of which around about 198,000 is coming in from conferencing events. Obviously, the trading company, the catering part of the trading company supports the conferencing in the food and beverages that it supplies with that. So it's a fairly key part of our business, but it is only part of the business that we do.
Councillor Illingworth.
Thank you. I have 4 questions. Okay. The first question is, how many people does Horse Cross employ, and what's the annual turnover of the business?
We have about 150 full-time equivalents at the moment, and the group turnover has gone up to £5.3 million this year.
Okay. Thank you. It means it's a significant business in our area. The second question, and I've just received the latest brochure this morning, and it's got a wide range of activities on offer. But apart from that, how else do you benefit disadvantaged groups within our communities?
We do a number of we do a range of performances. This year we did 2 autism-specific performances for people with autism. We have an agreement with Stagecoach that provides us with a certain number of tickets that we give to disadvantaged areas of the city to allow them to come to performances with us. We run a range of different creative learning opportunities for all ages, which includes Horse Cross Voices as a community choir, the Perth Youth Theatre, and within the creative learning, we have opportunities for people to come in and do different parts of it so that they can either take part in it. We give people opportunities for work experience and development, and we give them opportunities for big participatory projects as well.
Okay, thank you. Third question is, the Winter Festival cost Perth Kinross Council round about £340,000, and they've estimated that it boosted the Perth economy by £1.5 million. Do you have any figures on how Horse Cross boosts Perth and Kinross economy?
We've been discussing recently about getting a more up-to-date economic impact assessment done. The last one was done prior to the theatre opening, and that raised a figure of, I think, £6.1 million contribution to the economy, given the amount of work that and using the information that they had from the theatre before it closed. So I think we'll be looking, and we've been talking to the council already about doing a new impact assessment to see what the current figures might be now, given that there's been some inflation in there as well.
Okay. And the fourth question is, what do you think is the best way forward for Horse Cross to grow and deliver the greatest long-term value to our communities and the local economy?
I think the interesting thing about opening a new theatre is that everyone's expectations is for it to be hugely successful immediately. I think my experience in the past and the experience of colleagues who've opened theatres that have been closed for a period of time is that it quite often takes between 3 and 5 years to get it up and running properly, and to get all the operations going. One of those areas really is where we're trying to get the audiences back. So if you close a building for 5 years, many of them go and do other things. They find other elements to fill their lives with. And part of our job now is to put together a programme that's going to encourage people back into the building more regularly than they were before. And that's why I'm so heartened to see that we've got such a good increase in new bookers, because if we were just relying on the old audiences, it would be a much, much more difficult thing to do. We've got new programmes in place that will take a little bit of time to develop, particularly a programme for families and young children. And having spent my time in Eden Court, wondering at the number of families and young people that were coming into their programme, it's been really important for me to start the process here with the hope that we're going to get those numbers of people back in. We've had a really strong programme of work for families and young people, and we're just beginning to see now the effect that it's having across the community with increased bookings. They're nowhere near as high as we want them yet, but we're expecting that to continue to grow as people realise what sort of work we can offer them in the theatre.
Okay, thank you. That's excellent answers.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you very much. I'm heartened to hear of the number of new bookers that you seem to be getting off the new website, and presumably you have, if you like, the records of people's books, so you genuinely know that these are new bookers. But can you say, are we attracting an audience from Firth of Perth and Kinross, or are these people from more locally? Because I think to me it's important that we are gathering an audience from as far and wide as we can.
Well, the information I have is that for the postcodes PH1 and PH2, they make up just under 45% of our bookers. And then all the rest after that are below 2.5% of the bookings that we have. So there's a wide range of people coming from across the country, and obviously for some of the programmes we've done as far as Edinburgh and Aberdeen and Inverness. But the main bulk of our bookings come from PHCOs, PH1 and 2.
What about all the PH postcodes, like PH10, which is all Blairgowrie, etc., around PH8, which is Dunkeld? It would be easy to get all the Perthshire postcodes rather than the Perth City ones.
Well, the PH10 one is the next highest, which at 2.4%. I'd need to go through the others in a bit more detail if you wanted a Perth breakdown.
That would then give us a Perthshire, because I'm sure in the paper we saw this morning that it was 80% from Perthshire, Perth and Kinross, and 20% from outside, which is obviously totally different from the figures we've just had there.
Well, I haven't added up all the Perthshire postcodes into that. It's just the top two that I've given you just now.
Thanks. Councillor Dugan and Councillor McCobb.
Thanks very much, and thank you again for the presentation. I just wonder if I could seek assurance that we can look forward to Horsecross Management and officers of Perth and Kinross Council working together maybe a little bit more to integrate your offer during the Winter Festival further into the events that are taking place in Perth. Can we be assured that Horsecross are for the coming Winter Festival and subsequent ones are cited on when the peak concentrations of footfall will be in the city, and that we've got something set up, whether it's catering, whether it's events, whether it's experiences for children and things like that, that we've got something on offer at all of these times in order to add very positively to the Winter Festival, but also to help bolster your accounts.
We're very keen to be working more closely with the events team at Perth and Kinross Council, and I've been trying very hard to manage our business at the same. We have different programming timetable. So quite often we have a program that's already in place by the time we find out what the Perth Kinross events team are doing. But we do try extremely hard to match that when we can. And we have a senior manager that's the link person between ourselves and the events team to try and ensure that we don't have as many anomalies as has previously been the case. Clearly, it's important for us to take every advantage that we can to bring people into the building. But at the same time, and you'll understand that we try to manage the catering operations to ensure that we don't lose money on it. And so we have to be quite cautious about when we take on other activities when we don't actually have activities on in our own building.
Thanks. And I've brought the issue up before, as you'll remember, on the light switch on day when every coffee shop, etc. in Perth was rammed till about 11 o'clock at night, with a lot of activity outside the concert hall building. It was black at 5 o'clock. It didn't seem to tie up with the number of people that were going to be in Perth on that day. Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. And thank you for your presentation today. While it's very welcome that you're focusing quite a lot on achieving the savings that have been identified, I'm wondering what similar effort has been put into increasing revenue and increasing income across the board. And it's interesting some of the comments about where your audience is coming from, because we have quite a vibrant tourism industry here in Perth and Kinross. And so I'm just wondering what activities, if any, you're taking to leverage some of that footfall coming into the area to access the facilities and the offerings from Horsecross.
Well, we have a number of other events that come in which are kind of connected. We have a brass band festival that's now been brought in from China that has been part of a program that has been developed by Perth Kinross Council. But throughout the year, we have a range of different activities going on which we hope will attract people here, and we know that we get audiences from outside of the city centre to come to see some of those things as well. We're very, very keen to support the tourism approach and certainly the conferencing work that we do. Quite a lot of that is directly turned into additional bed nights to the hotels in the area around the concert hall and the theatre.
If I may ask a supplementary, while it's interesting that there's an additional bed nights for the hotels, is there any collaborative work ongoing with the hotels, particularly those who receive coach parties, or any promotional work going on to try and create demand for visitors to come to Perth specifically, either as part of a wider coach tour around Scotland, for example, or just as part of a package offering in collaboration with, for example, hotels in the tourism industry?
We've started those conversations, but they are at a very early stage at the moment, because obviously we've identified that there is a market there, and quite often people are not getting something to do in the evenings because we don't maybe have something on that they would want to see, particularly for that particular coach group. So we are talking to them about what we might be able to do, and we were looking particularly for the summer months to see what else we might be able to put on to attract extra people into the building.
Thank you. You've cancelled Southern Fried Festival this year, something that you've been doing every single year, which is the sort of thing you've described already, in which you build up a following. You build up people putting in their diary year after year after year, and they come along to it. Some of the events you did were free outside in the Horsecross Plaza, where people would turn up and then disappear again without giving you any money. So what are you going to do in place of that this year?
Well, the Southern Fried Festival, unfortunately, even though it was the record year that we had this year, continued to lose us money. So we wanted to take, and more importantly, we couldn't identify some key headline acts that we wanted to bring over that would form the core of the festival for this year. So we've taken a year out to reconsider how, A, we can make sure that the quality of the festival is maintained, and B, that we can put it together in such a way that we can make it cost effective for us, because even with the additional income that we got through the trading company, it still lost us a considerable amount of money. it's quite a high-risk venture as well, because we're investing quite a lot of money to bring artists across from America, and unless we can be absolutely certain that we're going to get the income from it, it puts an even greater pressure on us to achieve budgets.
I'm originally from Edinburgh, and you'll know Edinburgh has the Fringe and Festival every single year. I'm not comparing Perth with Edinburgh, or comparing anything we do in Perth and Kinross with the international festival that goes on there every year. But as a resident there, I never went to anything during the festival that was linked with the actual official organisation. I went to the Fringe events, and the Fringe events tended to be stand-up comedy. That's what people flocked to see in Edinburgh. By their hundreds, they pack themselves into rooms where there's only standing, and you can hardly breathe, and it's sweating hot, and they pay their money and they go along. I don't see stand-up in either the theatre or in Horsecross, other than on occasion when one of the comedy superstars comes around. Is that not the market that will grab your 18 to 25-year-olds, which you seem to get absolutely no business from at all?
I think you're absolutely right. I think that comedy is an area that's underrepresented. We tried to put on comedy that becomes available, and a fantastic example of that was Jim Smith, that we programmed for one night, and then almost immediately had to program for a second night, because the first night was completely sold out, and the second night was sold out fairly quickly after that. So certainly it's a part of the programming that we're investigating to develop a little bit further. Comedy is also one of those ones where they're well known, people turn out for, and sometimes when they're not so well known, it's more difficult to sell. We're ending up having to pay a guarantee to a lot of these people, and so we want to be absolutely certain that we're going to make the money back on that.
Are there any further questions from the committee? No, well, thanks very much, Mike, for coming along, and Peter, and wish you all the best moving forward, and I'll probably see you in 6 weeks or whenever it is again. I don't know. You're in the middle of the summer, hopefully a temperate summer. So thanks again for coming along your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Okay, we'll move on to paper 5, which is a summary report on the Care Inspectorate and Education Scotland's inspections. As it says in the introduction, the purpose of the report is to provide an overview of the performance of education and children's services inspected and reported over the past year by the Care Inspectorate. And it also sets out the services' approach to implement improvement actions that have arisen out of these inspections. And I'm going to ask Jackie Pepper to introduce the report, please.
Thank you, Convener. I'm pleased to introduce this report, which provides an overview of the outcomes from external inspection of education and care services by Education Scotland and the Care Inspectorate. Reported are the outcomes from inspections of services for which Perth and Kinross Council is the registered provider, along with partner providers with whom we contract for the provision of early learning and childcare. Paragraph 1.4.1 lists the factors which makes the analysis this year particularly difficult and complex, and makes direct comparisons over the years also more complex, and this is mainly due to changes and improvements to the inspection models nationally. Over the period 2018-19, the majority of inspections you will see are unannounced, with the rest being short notice. And committee should also be aware that there are increased expectations from the inspectorates, particularly in relation to standards for early learning and childcare in line with national policy. Overall, this report shows that the findings from external scrutiny of services providing education and care remains positive, and that performance across Perth and Kinross is consistently above our comparators and nationally. However, we're not complacent, and the findings from inspection have already informed a clear agenda for improvement, and some of that's contained within the report. Happy to take questions, and I have the heads of education and a member of the research and performance team here to answer questions too.
Thanks very much, Jackie. Councillor Ahern.
Thanks very much. I'm well aware this is a summary report, and I believe it's gone to Lifelong Learning, who have probably asked more in-depth questions, but it's now before us in scrutiny. And in particular, Appendix D, when we go into the performance indicators for preschools, primary and secondary, there is a fair amount of satisfactory results and a 3-week. I tried to follow the links in the paper, and I tried to follow other links to try and find out where and what the problems were with regards to why they were regarded as weak and satisfactory. But I, after a couple of hours, still wasn't able to find out what schools came out as being weak or satisfactory. And probably 2 questions. Should we not have had a more in-depth report coming to scrutiny, or are we entitled to ask for a more in-depth report to give us the reasons behind the weak and the satisfactory indicators?
Thank you very much, Councillor Ahern. I think it's fair to say that the Executive Subcommittee of Lifelong Learning has access to all of the information and the detailed reports. Also at that committee in attendance are the heads of service, quality improvement officers and the heads of the establishments concerned, and there is a great deal of questioning of those individuals, as well as inquiry into any improvement or action plans that might be arising from that. I think one of the things that the introduction to the report indicates that there is a variation in the number of quality indicators that are inspected at each inspection. So I think you may find it difficult to find that from all of the individual reports. I'm just wondering whether Sharon would like to say something about the particular question around weeks and satisfactories.
In terms of the details of the school reports in which schools and preschool centres achieved weak or unsatisfactory or adequate evaluations depending on the Care Inspectorate or Education Scotland reports, we've recently introduced a table of those schools and those evaluations, and that is available, as Jackie said, in the Lifelong Executive Subcommittee report. And the latest one in March that took place gives a full indication of all of the schools and all of the gradings within that. It may be possible if Scrutiny Committee would wish that we could replicate that report for a future Scrutiny Committee as part of the annual report.
Yes, it would, because it's come before us, and obviously we've picked up that there are weak indicators there, and I think as a Scrutiny Committee we're entitled to know why and what schools in particular, and why they've been marked as weak and satisfactory, which is, I would imagine, the reason why the reports come before scrutiny in the first place.
I'd be quite happy if that could be supplied in future to members of the committee, and they can go into the depth that they wish, if that's agreeable by yourselves.
Yes, I think that's something we can take forward for the next committee. Yeah.
Thanks very much. And does that satisfy you, Councillor Hare?
Yes, thanks very much.
Right, thank you. Councillor Dugan.
Thanks, Convener. Like Councillor Ahern, it's Appendix D, and I look at the tables D1, D2 and D3, and clearly part of the problem here is that we've only had one inspection of a secondary school, but nevertheless it appears to me, and I'm happy to be corrected, that of the 6 outcomes that you can be awarded in any given measure under an inspection, you've got 3 that you really do want, beginning good, very good and excellent, and 3 that you'd really rather not be awarded. And at preschool and primary, notwithstanding the very much more or very much greater number of inspections that they've got, the goods, very goods and excellence massively outweigh the satisfactory weeks and unsatisfactories. 37 playing 11 in preschool and 32 playing 8 in primary, whereas in secondary we've got satisfactory across the board for that one school that was inspected. So I think I would want to understand why in the same local authority we could have such a disparate outcome when we cross that line into secondary. Clearly a part of that answer will be that this is the result of one school. But if that is part of the answer, we would like assurance, or I would like assurance about the remedial steps for that one school and how that is hopefully deemed to be an outlier across our secondary school estate.
Jackie, can you give Councillor Duggan some comfort, or Roger?
Thank you, Councillor Duggan, for your question. You're quite right. That inspection for the one school, that we've not had any secondary inspections in Perth Kinross since 2014 was the last one. And since that time, we've moved to How Good Is Our School 4, which is a different set of parameters. So we are quality indicators. So we're working with our schools. We have asked and welcome any further inspections from Education Scotland. And we do believe that that is, as you say, an outlier, and actually we would reflect further what's in the early years in primary from our other schools. So we have asked for that, and we do feel that we wish further engagement with Education Scotland.
So is it the view, Convener, is it the view of officers that were we to have another inspection or another 2 inspections over the next couple of years of our secondary schools, we wouldn't necessarily see such a gloomy picture for secondary?
I'm sure that our officers will be confident that this is an outlier, and the next inspection will show a different set of results, but I'll get them to put themselves on the line rather than myself.
Yes, I'm quite happy to say that I expect there is some very good practice in our schools and some excellent practice, and I would like to see that reflected in reports coming through. But those will come to committee in due course as and when those schools are selected.
I think Jackie's got something to add to that.
I think just to add to that, yes, it's been some time since there was an inspection published or undertaken and published within the secondary school sector in Perth and Kinross, but the outcomes from this will be taken forward through the quality improvement and the framework for improving schools through that. So it's not seen as a one-off. The lessons from that will be taken forward across the work that's in place across the secondary sector.
Thanks. Can I have a supplementary and another question? Is it wrong to presume that if the inspectors have made those findings in one of, I think, 9 secondaries in Perth and Kinross, something of that order, if they found that in one of our secondary schools and they haven't been here for 5 years, well, can we anticipate that they'll be back pretty quick to look at another school?
We don't have advance notice of any further inspections, but we would expect them back because they have increased the number of inspections in schools, so we are expecting them back.
Thanks, Convener. And it's on page 25. It's the excellent comparators that show how well we're doing in a range of measures at a range of levels. It's, again, I'm happy to be corrected. From memory, I seem to recall that across the majority of measures against our comparator authorities in Scotland and against Scotland as a whole, that I seem to recall us being predominantly in the upper quartile of performance, and usually about the midpoint of that upper quartile. And I note from page 25 and page 26 that raising attainment in Perth and Kinross is higher than our comparator authorities and higher than Scotland as a whole. So is it safe for us to conclude that not only are we performing very well in Perth and Kinross, but we're also increasing the performance relative to other local authorities across the country?
It would seem to me, on the basis of these tables, that is the case, but I'll look for confirmation from the officers.
Thank you, Councillor Dugan. It is fair to say that in actual fact, in terms of inspections in primary schools and in early year centres, we are bucking the national trend, but we really aren't complacent around that. And your previous question about the number of satisfactory evaluations across the country are becoming more common than goods, very goods or better. And as far as Education Scotland is concerned, their standard for schools being satisfactory is their standard. So if a school receives a satisfactory grading, they're satisfied that the education does not require any further involvement from them. Within Perth and Kinross, we have decided that an evaluation of good or better is our standard. So any school that falls below satisfactory does require an action plan from us in terms of our own quality improvement processes. So yes, we are bucking the trend nationally in all of the quality indicators, but as Jackie said earlier, we're really not complacent around that, and we have received some less than satisfactory inspections recently this year. And I suppose that just helps us to focus on where we need to target our support. In terms of raising attainment, we are also bucking the trend nationally around that, but our own evaluation of how well we're raising attainment is that there's good indications that we're making very early gains at the early years in preschool centres and at the early years of primary 1 and beyond that, but we still have significant gaps in terms of those areas of children who are coming from ACORN 4 and 5. So that is a priority for us, even though it looks on inspection results that we're doing a good job. Our own analysis shows us that we know there are particular areas of the curriculum, and particularly writing and numeracy, that we need to do better in, and that's a focus for us.
Thanks. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm on page 26 looking at the preschool centre quality indicators. The two that immediately stick out as things that across the whole of Scotland we're not good at is leadership of change and self-evaluation for self-improvement, which are both very strong governance and quality indicators for a good service. So I'd like to know what we're doing to support head teachers and staff to become better in these roles.
Sharon.
Yeah, thank you. You're right, Councillor McEwen, those two QIs are incredibly important in terms of local authorities' comfort in that an early year setting or a school is being well led, and those two are really very important for us in terms of how well we're doing. I think it's safe to say that there's been significant change and a changing landscape within the early years sector with the expansion of early learning and childcare of 1140 hours, and there's significant strain, I suppose, on the system in relation to that. And while we are going through that change within preschool centres, we have a significant change programme taking place, and it's really important for us to maintain our quality and improve that quality as we go into that new system. Our leaders of our private partner providers and also our head teachers in our schools have had to upskill their staff and themselves quite significantly as they move into things that they've not had to deal with before. Things like the introduction of 2-year-olds into nursery classes for longer hours. So there is a real need for us as a local authority to support our leaders, and we do have very good plans in place to ensure that our leaders are supported through that. There's also a significant challenge within the early years sector in terms of turnover of staff. And as we move into that bigger landscape of having to ensure the quality of not just our partner providers, but of all settings within Perth and Kinross, we're undertaking quite a significant programme of continuous professional learning, and we're doing that in conjunction with Education Scotland and the Care Inspectorate to support that. Which brings me to self-evaluation and school improvement. And again, there are increased expectations from both the Care Inspectorate and Education Scotland. So we're working hard with our school leaders and our early year settings to make sure that they are kept up to date and abreast of everything that's expected of them.
Councillor McCall and then Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. My question really is more of a plea to make sure that the numbers on the tables and the numbers on the graphs match up. I will advise you separately, but some of them don't match up, so it's very irritating to me personally, because I like numbers to be exact and precise, but it can be misleading, so it's perhaps something just to be a bit careful about.
Thank you for that. I think look forward to hearing some of your comments on that. We'll take that on board. Thanks very much, Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Convener. Given that there's such an emphasis placed in the inspections on self-evaluation, for the secondary school that was rated across the board as satisfactory, what was their score? What was their self-evaluated score?
The school concerned had looked at all the inspection reports under the new regime from throughout the last year and evaluated themselves as good against those ones, against those reports, against the criteria set by Education Scotland. Education Scotland had a slightly different view when they came in, but looked at and reflected some of the feedback that had been given in earlier improvement visits with the Quality Improvement Officer and team around the school.
Okay, I mean, I, in a former professional capacity, used to be an auditor, but obviously I was also somebody that hosted external auditors, and I always found it useful to, as we were hosting external auditors, to try and be as honest with ourselves as possible, and to identify all of the possible failings, or not failings, but areas for improvement up front, so that we could, if asked about those by an external inspector, have a prepared answer, and certainly an answer that we had identified that as a potential area for improvement. So I wonder if officers would agree that perhaps if we're scoring if a school is scoring itself good and ends up at a satisfactory level, it would be better to have identified that it was better to have identified in advance that there were areas for improvement needed, rather than overcompensating or overscoring in the first place. I've got another question, but
I think part of the problem seemed to be that not changing the goalposts, but the moving of the strength of the criteria has had a lot. So, in all fairness, they may have judged it was sort of one category out from satisfactory to good, and if the criteria are being tightened up to make satisfactory the norm rather than good the norm, that maybe have part of it, but I'll pass it to the officers.
I think really just to refer to what I said earlier, which is the lessons learnt from this will be built into the quality improvement and the support and challenge to not only that particular school, but to all secondary schools, because we are learning as we move forward on that. So it's really just to reassure you on that. I don't know if Roger wants to say anything else in relation to that.
No, I say we are working with all schools based on, and there's a detailed look at the results from that inspection, and it's been shared and worked with all schools and all head teachers to look at their self-evaluation and their quality improvement gradings to ensure that they're spot on in future.
Thanks. And the next question.
Yep, and the next one is, thank you for those answers. The next question is, we've got in Appendix E the performance relative to comparator authorities. There's a footnote that says that specifies which authorities are included in our comparator group: Argyll and Bute, Aberdeenshire, Stirling, Scottish Borders and Highland. So a question in two parts. Firstly, it says that the comparator data is up to July 2018 only. Could you just clarify if that's the point up until which data is available, or whether the comparator has changed or morphed or something after July 2018, and also, well, I'll let you answer that one first, and then a different tack on the same topic.
No, just to clarify, yeah, that is just the point at which data is available currently. Okay. Obviously, there's a large amount of data to collect when we're looking at all of our comparator authorities, and getting that information from Education Scotland means that it doesn't come on a regular basis. It's kind of an annual release. So we're expecting another update probably towards the middle of this year that will bring us more up to date with that full range of information.
Okay. And my next question was, given the push there is from various quarters for regional improvement collaborative models, why don't we have comparator? Why don't we have a Tayside comparator? Because I think if elected members are to be persuaded of the benefit of a regional improvement model or collaborative model with our neighbouring local authorities, geographically 2 of our 7 neighbouring local authorities, it would be interesting to know how we actually perform against them, and therefore how much we have to learn from them or they from us.
I think that's an interesting observation, and something certainly we'll take back to the discussions within the collaborative about how we can compare aspects of performance across the collaborative, and also consider what that might mean in terms of presentation to committees such as this. Thanks.
Thanks. Okay. So now on to comments.
Thank you very much. The more I see of these tables and figures, the more I realise how complex they are, and actually how difficult it is to present them cogently, and actually ultimately how good a job you do of presenting them reasonably cogently, because they are very complex. But I take heart from the fact that actually there seems to be a high degree of risk management here, in that the authorities go back to those areas where they believe that inspection is needed, and the fact that we have a relatively low number of inspections in all areas actually is indicative of a perception in the inspecting authorities that we don't need to be looked at. So that actually, you know, I take as a plus. And then actually when you start drilling into it even further, there are different sorts of full inspections, short inspections, follow-through inspections, which choose to look at specific things. So it becomes very difficult to sort out the oranges from the apples in terms of inspection style. But there again, I would go back to the point made by Councillor Dugan. I think then it's very tempting to look at each figure in detail, but I think actually that can lead you down a false trail, because you either have to look at every figure in detail, which perhaps then we should look at actually the totality of the school estate and see how many places simply haven't been looked at because there hasn't been a perception of need. And so going back to the tables D1 and D2, yes, it's very heartening. Sadly, we seem to live in a world where satisfactory is only just satisfactory. But it's very heartening to see that in table D1 we have 37 indicators at the top end and 11 below. The second table we have 32 at the top end, 8 below. For me, the fact that there are only 4 indicators from one school means it's actually very difficult to draw any measured conclusions from table D3, and actually the best measured conclusion I take from that is that that's the first inspection we've had for 4 years, you said, and the fact that the inspectors haven't thought we've needed looking at for 4 years based on previous performance is the best sign there is. And perhaps if they've looked at one school and it has been satisfactory throughout, then perhaps they may be saying, you know, we may go back again. But again, I take heart from the fact that our authorities' standard, if you like, is to be good or better. But no, thanks very much for these figures overall. As I said at the start, that the more I see them, the more complicated they are and the more difficult it is to present them cogently. And I think you do a very reasonable job. Thank you.
If there are no other comments, can we note the report? Thanks. Now we'll move on to item 6 on the agenda. This item is an update from the informal session we had at the end of the last scrutiny meeting, where we started off discussing the performance of Business Gateway, and with a lot of work from Councillor Stewart, we alighted on what we will call an anomaly in the funding model, which we then asked officers to take forward, and you saw I circulated the letter that we as a scrutiny committee, you asked me to write to the Chief Executive to look to take things forward on this. So Keith McNamara is going to give us an update on what has happened in the intervening 8 weeks with our request, and then we will be able to ask questions of what has happened.
Could I just make a point before Mr McNamara speaks, that obviously the last session, and there was some confusion about this when it came to full council, was a private session, whereas this is obviously a public session and there are members of the press now. So I think it would be useful to make sure that we start from the beginning, as it were, in terms of how we've got to this point and not just the update, because we are aware of what was discussed last time, but not everyone else will necessarily be so.
Well, I think we'll let Keith give the update, and then if there's any blanks that he doesn't fill in, we will give it. That was the sort of précis I gave it there, because it was not part of it wasn't a formal scrutiny meeting, and that's why it wasn't in public. It was just an information session, really, or a discussion session. And now we are in full committee and an open meeting. Well, I think we'll hear what Keith has to say first, and then if you can make comments or fill it in that form if you wish. Are you happy, Councillor Purvis? Keith.
Thank you very much, Convener, and I'll try and fill in some of the gaps maybe to help Councillor Purvis out. You're absolutely right. At the end of the last Scrutiny Committee on the 6th of February this year, Scrutiny members received a presentation by my colleagues David Littlejohn and Alison Seggie on the works of the Business Gateway. Members heard about the good works of the Business Gateway in supporting business, both in terms of starting up businesses and also developing existing businesses. However, there were questions from members, as you've already mentioned, about budget savings made by Dundee City Council in their 2017 budget. The funding for this activity comes from Scottish Government to Dundee City Council, who deal with the Business Gateway on behalf of the other participating councils, which are Perth Kinross Council and Angus Council, via operating principles which have been agreed between the Scottish Government and COSLA. Committee members at that session questioned the budget decision by Dundee City Council. I can confirm that following your letter, Convener, these concerns were articulated in a letter from our Chief Executive to the Chief Executive of Dundee City Council on the 19th of February of this year. The Chief Executive received a response from the Chief Executive of Dundee City Council on the 26th of March, explaining their rationale for the actions which were taken. Our Chief Executive has subsequently written again to the Chief Executive of Dundee City Council on the 10th of April, challenging some of the explanations from Dundee City Council, and I understand this issue will be raised by our own Chief Executive at one of her regular meetings with her fellow Chief Executives from Dundee City Council and Angus Council. So therefore, in summary, this matter is ongoing at present, and it would be our intention to report back to the next Scrutiny Committee with progress on this issue.
Thanks for that, Keith. It's very disappointing that it took 5 weeks on such an important matter raised at scrutiny by the Chief Executive of Perth Kinross Council before she received a reply. I take it there was not even a holding reply in that time. To take 5 weeks before we got a response. that is an inordinate amount of time to take. This apparently started in 2016. Do we have any clarity if this is this top slicing, as it appears, of funding that should be coming towards Business Gateway and to be used in Perth and Kinross as well as Angus and Dundee? If this money is on a recurring basis or if it was a one-off basis in 2016?
Yeah, our understanding this is a recurring saving, convener.
So that's a recurring saving of circa 200,000 over 3 years. How long have our officers been aware of this? And why did it take until the Scrutiny Committee till some action was taken?
The information we have is that there had already been correspondence and discussion with Dundee City Council over this issue. I don't have that information to hand at present, convener. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you for that update, Mr. McNamara. And would you be able to give us, I know obviously that you said that the Chief Executive has gone back on the original response that's been received from Dundee City Council, but you talked about explaining the rationale for making that decision. Would you be able to just give us a summary of the points that they made in that letter from the Chief Executive of Dundee City Council, just to give the Scrutiny Committee a further understanding of how they are justifying this action?
My understanding of the rationale for that was it was in relation to additional support costs which Dundee City Council needed to incur.
Would that be up to 20% of the fund that they were dispersing would be the cost of dispersing the fund?
Can I ask a follow-up to that question you've raised? Surely if they were taking it as a saving, it wouldn't be a saving if they're actually using it to recover costs, so it can't be both. Because the original rationale was a saving, was it not?
I think that's the basis of what our Chief Executive is going back to Dundee City Council and to explain in more detail what this is about.
I have another question, is that all right?
Certainly.
Obviously, we had a broader discussion at the last meeting about Business Gateway and the different ways of delivering the contract and whether we could deliver it in-house and different forms that could take. But at the minute, we still have some time until we will be able to take that decision, because there's some time running on the contract that we have with Elevator. Just in terms of that's the case, isn't it? Because the issue isn't with Elevator. The people who are delivering the contract, the issue is with Dundee City Council. So I don't know if we talked about break clause and other things, but anyway, you can come on to that in a minute. Just to go back to my point though, if the Dundee City Council continue to take this position and continue to take this recurring saving, once we've had the discussions with between the Chief Executives, is there a way by which we can negotiate with the Scottish Government so that the money for our allocation would come directly to Perth and Kinross Council, and then we would pass on that directly to Dundee City Council for the specific purpose of delivering that contract? Therefore, we would set the amount so that could we come to a relationship whereby the money comes to us first, and we are, I don't know whether it's commissioning them or however we would describe it, to do the service. So actually they're not getting the money as a pot which they can top slice and deliver however they want, and then use the money that they save to fund other parts of their own service. Just wondering whether that's a possibility if we can't reconcile this in between the Chief Executives.
If this does not manifest itself in a way in which we can reach resolution, we need to look at various options, what we can do. And one of the things we would have to do is, the way the funding is distributed is through Scottish Government causal arrangements, so we'd have to speak to Scottish Government and causal around that one, but that we could be open to looking at that as a possibility.
Councillor Dugan, you can first go on.
The arrangements that Mr McNamara set out, well, regime rather than the specific arrangements that Mr McNamara set out about COSLA and Scottish Government must be entered into voluntarily, and they clearly were. And I don't take the view that some take that lead authority models are inherently bad. I think this is the problem we've identified, and I think it applies to this case, and this case alone, I hope. But I think Councillor Purvis is right that if this can't be satisfactorily remedied in a cooperative and constructive way between the three Tayside local authorities, then we would want, and the wider on this committee and the wider council, we'd want an assurance that officers will recover this money. It pains me a little bit that we're asking for it back. I think we need to, if we haven't already, take a far more robust hand in this situation. However, I appreciate that councillors, no doubt for the good of all, are much more even-handed than I am.
As Lisa's pointed out, the money probably wouldn't come back to us, but it would go back into the pot to be used for businesses, and that's what we want.
Whereupon businesses in Perth and Kinross could then access it, which they currently can't.
Yeah, because we wouldn't want to take it back to use it for any other business, because that's, we could, Councillor Stewart.
I think in one of the previous answers, Mr McNamara might have just skipped over one of the parts of one of the questions that he was asked, which is, do we know exactly how much the budget saving was? And therefore how much of it is approximately Angus's share, approximately Perth and Kinross's council's share, and what the cumulative running total to the end of the 2018-19 financial year is.
We reckon that the value's in the region of £150,000.
£150,000 per year from the contract, so not £150,000 per year to Perth and Kinross, but maybe 75, 80. I know it's difficult to estimate how much is each local authority's share, but then it's not, because if we weren't entered into a Tayside Business Gateway model, we would be getting a sum through the Scottish Government COSLA arrangements, which would accrue to Perth and Kinross. So it should be possible to proportionately work out how much of it is Perth and Kinross's, how much of it is Angus's, how much of it is Dundee's, shouldn't it?
The contract's always been Tayside-wide, Councillor Stewart, but if one takes it £150,000 and one was to split it three ways between the three Tayside councils, at face value it would look like £50,000 per council.
Or possibly slightly more for Perth and Kinross if you did it on either a geography or a population basis or a taxpayer basis. Right, okay. And the £150,000 saving, does that represent a saving just for, this is a situation, I don't know whether it has been discussed by councillors at Angus Council. Do you know whether Angus elected members in a public forum have been made aware of this situation?
I'm unaware of whether Angus councillors have been involved, Councillor Stewart, although I believe that the Chief Executive of Angus Council is aware of this issue.
And just going back to in terms of the Councillor Purvis and Councillor Dugan's point regarding retrieving for at least the benefit of Business Gateway any monies which have been, is top sliced a generous enough word to use, by Dundee City Council. My understanding is that there's a memorandum of understanding or a memorandum of agreement which covers the Business Gateway. Dundee City Council's initial response to the cut being pointed out to them was to say, yeah, we shouldn't have done it under the memorandum of agreement, we won't do it again. but therefore there must be within the memorandum of understanding, or whatever document it is, there must be, I would have thought, some sort of arbitration mechanism. Have we checked out whether there's an arbitration mechanism or a restitution mechanism within that document?
I'm just taking some advice, but we understand that it's not, arbitration is not actually documented in that operating agreement. What is in the operating agreement, if changes are made, that the party changing them should seek the agreement of partners. And that's one of the issues which we have communicated to the Chief Executive of Dundee City Council.
Thank you. I think I just wanted to reflect, because I kind of knew the answer beforehand, but I wanted to reflect on the fact that we just have it confirmed, I guess, that the changes were made to the financing of Business Gateway without the agreement of the other parties. That should have been obtained beforehand, and that fact was acknowledged, but there was no offer to make restitution or to go back and undo the change that had been done. Now, given that it was on a one-off, given that it was done in one budgetary year, that might be a situation that we could live with, although, to be honest, the amount that Perth Kinross businesses are being shortchanged, whether it's 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000 pounds, is actually neither here nor there. There is a principle involved here. However, because it was done on a recurring basis, and the offer was only not to do it again, the offer convener was only for it not to be repeated, for another cut to be made, then we're still, as has been pointed out, suffering the consequences in terms of our access to, across Tayside, for small and medium-sized businesses, we're still suffering the consequences of that decision, which was made without agreement.
I totally agree with you, except I would not think it was acceptable even in the first instance. If it was a one-off, it should never have happened. It should have been hauled up at the first time, at the first notification of it. It would be interesting to know if this was included in this year's budget of Dundee City Council, again, if they've used this money and if they're using this 150,000 for something else, were they using it again this year?
I think what we're saying is that the saving is a recurring saving, so it wouldn't be topped up again this subsequent year. It's a saving which is made, and that saving just stays there. So it's if it is £150,000, £150,000 that carries on.
Yes, so that, but really it's another 150,000 out of what they every year it's 150,000 they're taking out, and they're using that 150,000 to supplement their own budget. And if I can't believe that was done. If we wrote them on the 19th of February and their budget was after that, and they've been using that money to make their budget balanced still, that should have been a pressure on them, on their budget of £150,000. If it's £150,000 every year and they were to stop doing it, it creates a pressure on their budget of £150,000. So it is £150,000 every year.
That's our understanding, correct? It's a recurring 150,000, and to the best of our knowledge, we don't think they've reinstated that money into their budget for the financial year 1920.
So after our chief executive wrote to them pointing this out, they continued to do this, the officers of Dundee City Council.
I don't have any information to the contrary that they haven't, but we've not been made aware that they reinstated that funding into their budget, and certainly the communication from the Chief Executive of Dundee City Council didn't indicate that.
Okay, I don't, Councillor Barnacle.
I saw the copy of the original letter that the Chief Executive wrote to Dundee, but I haven't seen the response.
Neither have I.
Yeah, in the interest of transparency, given this is regarded, I think, by most committee members as quite a serious matter, should we not be seeing the correspondence and able to come to a view as to how we wish to proceed if it's not resolved properly?
I think we should. at the end of the day, but the committee asked me to write to the chief executive, and I've given the asked the chief executive to see if she can remedy the situation, and I think that it's only fair to let her have that opportunity. If she is unsuccessful with her overtures to Dundee City Council to point out the position, I think then we as a scrutiny committee will have to raise it further, and we should see this correspondence. But at the moment, I'm content to let the chief executive do what we asked her. Councillor Parrott.
Thank you. From my perspective, I think the position that we're in is that Dundee City Council has certainly benefited from monies that they shouldn't have benefited from. Business Gateway has lost out on monies that should have been available across the Tayside area that they're serving, some of which might have been spent in Perth and Kinross, because I don't think there's any requirement on Business Gateway to apportion that spend by authorities other than on the basis of good ideas from businesses or whatever. But I certainly believe that we should continue to pursue what is quite fundamentally to me money deprived, taken away from Business Gateway Tayside in a way that it shouldn't have been. And I think that we should, if you like, represent our concern, our continuing concern to the Chief Executive that it has taken Dundee City Council a long time to provide a response. We're heartened that the Chief Executive has gone back to Dundee City Council. We will be very interested in the further response that we get from Dundee City Council, and we remain seized of this issue to the point where, as Councillor Purvis says, if we don't get satisfaction in it, we should be going to COSLA and Scottish Government to see whether alternative arrangements are possible, because Dundee City Council are not administering this money in a way that we think is fit and proper. Does that seem to set out the position?
I think it does, and I think it should also be pointed out that as we do other collaborative projects, this will be a running sore that will be pointed to as bad example an example of bad practice, and it would be better if it was healed quickly.
Just another observation. I mean, in terms of the resolution that Councillors Purvis and Parrott were talking about, I think that's helpful. I wonder whether I had actually originally put the question to some officers of our council about what view either our auditors or Dundee City Council auditors, or Audit Scotland, for example, whichever would be the appropriate body, might take about changes to a budget without consequent or necessary changes to the agreement between the three councils. There was another point I was going to make, which is to do with Business Gateway, but separate from this, if that's all right, convenient.
Oh, okay, can I just take you up on your last point first? Sure. That I'll speak to the Chief Executive. I will then write to her and copy all in again, and I'll state how this meeting's gone and how we feel, and that we need a resolution of this, either that some action's been taken if our auditors, etc., can find a way forward before the next scrutiny committee, because I don't want this as another example of the can being kicked down the road. Are you happy with that? Is anybody happy with that, or would they rather I took some other action?
No, I think that's fine, Convener. Just to expand a little bit on Councillor Stewart's point. In as much, I mean, I understood it anyway, but it was helpful nevertheless to get the explicit clarity from the head of legal service that talk of recovering this money has to be in the context of applying it to the use for which it was intended. But the flip side of that is, how can it be competent to top slice this money in the interest of your general revenue fund? So that's something that needs to be asked as well.
Are you quite happy that we've finished this and then come to your other point, Councillor Hearn?
I'm just wondering whether there's any benefit in whoever contacting Scrutiny in Dundee or their equivalent of Scrutiny for their elected members to scrutinise why this has happened.
I think it should be maybe Angus Scrutiny Committee rather than Dundee.
Elected members in Dundee should be scrutinising why their council have done this in the first place.
Well, they voted it through, possibly.
But they probably haven't seen it.
I'm sure they'll be as well informed councillors as we are here in Perth and Kinross, so I'm sure they'll know everything that's going on.
I make a point, Convener?
Certainly.
If there are parameters through the Memorandum of Understanding about the way that the money that is allocated by the Scottish Government for Business Gateway is to be used, and if it is the case that there has been a breach of that by one of the authorities, surely that's a matter for Audit Scotland.
And that's the route we'll be going down, Michael. We'll take it in steps. And I'm still happy to leave with our Chief Executive, who I'm sure will put our view and her view quite forcibly forward. Councillor Stewart, your second.
Yeah, it was the wider point about what we need to do is to understand whether we're actually getting value for money for the amount of money that is going into Business Gateway, and it was to get a proper, we had a sort of private discussion, but I think we should have an on-the-record discussion and a report about the performance measures of Business Gateway, how they're achieving against those performance measures, and actually invite somebody from people from Business Gateway along to speak to the committee and answer those questions, rather than, last time we were trying to do it in an informal way through our officers at the last meeting. I think it would be better to invite Business Gateway here to put on the record and have something on paper that we could actually quiz them on and ask about their performance.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. That was the initial idea about the last informal discussion, but it was rather overtaken by one event. So yeah, I'm sure we could put that in in a future agenda.
And can I just add on that? If there was a paper that was to come forward, it would be useful if that could set out what other local authorities are doing, the different types of models that are on offer, and also I think I asked this when we had the informal session as well, but all the options available to us in terms of what this money can be spent on. Obviously, we have to use it to support businesses and startups and things like that. But are there models that no council is using which we could look at as well? So giving us the full information so that we can then form an opinion and take that forward on that basis.
Yeah, we could ask officers to do a briefing paper that came before, not even before, not just the week before, not in the papers, but in between committees, that you could then look at and thrash around before we actually come to the committee. Would that satisfy you? I'd still be happy if to put to bed the major question first, and then use that as a totally, once we've resolved that, a different agenda item. Okay. So, are there any comments on that? What we've decided, or is everybody quite happy? Can we agree this way forward? Thank you.